of those exciting things. But also 40 years ago, the 30th of June, 1981, it was the 1st of July. An unusual announcement had been made on the state broadcaster suggesting that all justices will be provided with military escorts. Well, it didn't make any big news because already judges have bodyguards. But the specificity was that they were going to be given military guards. And that made a lot of sense after that chilling announcement, the fact that in the Accra Plains, somewhere in the Bondasi camp, 3 judges of the High Court and a retired military officer had been gruesomely murdered. Save for the heavenly intervention of the rains, their bodies would have been completely wiped out, charred completely forever. At the time they were discovered, they had got into a state of decomposition. 40 years on, we mark that special day, which we call the Martyrs Day. I've been joined by the former president of the Ghana Bar Association, lawyer Anthony Forson, who will delve deeper into these conversations. Counsel, good morning. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Well, seen better days.
40 years on, after since 1982,
yeah.
What's running through your mind, first of all, as a lawyer and as a former leader of the bar?
Well, the emotions are different because at that time I was in infancy. Mm-hmm. So I was a very young boy then, and it was a strange feeling, that a colleague's father, Kwabene Japan, because he was also in infancy, had been killed. At 15, 16 years, it didn't make sense that why would somebody kill another person's father?
That's right.
So those were the emotions that we went through at that time. Of course, when I became a lawyer, the emotions became different because then I understood what it meant for a judge to be uprooted from his house and just killed for just doing his job. So as the years go by, as I grow older, I become more sober and reflective and see how dastardly that act was. And more, I think and support the fact that we must never forget and let those who are coming up also know what happened so that it doesn't happen again.
The commemoration of Martyrs Day on the 30th of June, year on year, and Justice George Kingsley Akwa of blessed memory would have their bus, put at the forefront of the Supreme Court and all of that. Has it changed anything in terms of the way we think, in terms of the way we look at things, democratic dispensation particularly?
That's a difficult question.
It's an easy one for you.
It's a difficult question in the sense that whether it's changed things for lawyers or it's changed things for judges or it's changed things for the general psyche of Ghanaians.
Right.
And the verdict is out there. I don't really know. But as a lawyer, I think that it has changed quite a lot of things because it put the wrong fear of God into people. The whole concept of democracy is based on freedom.
Right.
Freedom as enshrined in the Constitution, the freedom to think and the freedom to say what you feel. Now, when you go to court, of course, a judge has the liberty to be wrong. That is why in the court process, we have the appeal process.
Right.
You see, and I believe that everybody must be given that freedom. That is you and me, even you as a journalist, you must have that freedom to espouse what you believe, subject to the rules of the game. That is the constitutional rules, the social rules of respect, being moderate, temperate. So the feelings are different. But I believe that our problem as a country is our psyche.
How would we change that?
I think we have to go back to the basics and start from a next generation of people. Because you see, most of us beyond a certain age are filled with all kinds of viruses. We've grown up believing in certain wrong things. So I think like the Chinese did, we'll have to start from the basic schools and try to inculcate in the younger generation how to do right. For example, I always give the example of a secondary school in Cape Coast.
Okay.
Definitely not in Fansville. My brothers attended that school. And I think their 40th or 60th anniversary, one of my brothers came from London and realized that all the school's louvers were gone. Now, if a child goes through school for 5 years or 7 years, as the case may be, in a school without louvers, when he becomes Minister of Education and you tell him that a school doesn't have louvers, he doesn't see the big deal because that is his reality. You see, so that's why I'm saying that we are filled with all kinds of viruses. The kind of bathrooms we used in those days were not too much of a place of heavy sanitation. You know, so I think that we'll have to look at the next generation and look forward, because with some of the people, it's a lost cause.
Interesting, though. I'm looking at the emotions that the families of the departed, who you celebrate today, including the retired military officer. In 2001, at the advent of the Kufuor administration, we set up the National Reconciliatory Commission.
Yes.
Justice Amwasechi, the late General Erskine, and all of those people were there. Did that change anything? Did that heal the wounds as it was purposed for?
Definitely the wound cannot be healed.
Why not?
But it can be tapered down. There's no wound. Of course, every wound leaves a scar. So anytime you see the scar, you remember the wound. But the raw emotion, definitely one with time, it to taper down. But it can never be healed. I mean, if you should put yourself in that position, just take your dog. Assuming somebody just takes your dog and kills your dog. Your dog. Now, transpose that to a relative and transpose that to your father or your mother, as the case may be. It will never heal. But that effort by the whole country, you know, to, you know, make you see that, one, we appreciate your loss, what the bar is and the judiciary is doing. We celebrate the work that your people did. Helps to make you feel that they didn't die in vain.
Right.
That is the best we can do. But there's no way that such a traumatic experience can give total healing. No.
Could we, for example, say also, and those are shots of the funeral in 1982 of the 3 distinguished judges and also the retired military officer. You can tell on your screens there the mood and feel at the time and the pain and anguish that they had to go through. Of course, they were honored with the national colors, but as lawyer Forson is saying now, the pain and the sore cannot completely die. One of the cardinal points emanating from the NRC in 2001 was that people should be compensated. Most of those compensations have not happened. I had occasion to interview the daughter of Major General Odati Wellington, who mentioned that the compensation has not happened, and other persons as well. Do you think that perchance the compensation, if granted, as was recommended by the Commission, could help in the healing process?
Oh, of course. Of course. I mean, so long as it was realized that it ought to be done, then, of course, some serious thinking went into why it was recommended. And unfortunately, as a country, as I was coming, I heard on the news that I think Isaac Akwe has died.
Right.
And he charged his relatives that no GFA executive should come to his funeral. He shouldn't be draped in the national colors. And he was one of the 1978 squad, which won that. So you see that it is something which is recurrent. So I'm not surprised to hear that
the compensation has not been paid.
Because Isaac Akwe's matter dates 1978, and I think General Kutua Champo.
Right.
You know, and those are some of the things that, you know, dampens your spirit as a Ghanaian. We have a lot of institutions. I don't know whether it's a lack of goodwill, or as my lawyer friend Sankuma will say, Abroni Beye. I don't know. Because if somebody is entitled to something, he ought to be paid.
That's right.
I believe we find money for all kinds of things. So if a state institution set up by law has made a recommendation, it must be followed through.
You talked about the next generation, paying
Yes.
attention to them.
Yes.
And you also talk about the psyche. How do we, is the GBA, for example, collaborating with the Ghana Education Service and you feel like the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection to ensure that this finds its way into our curriculum, is well edged, so that the minds are shaped, people can now thinking of grabbing the substance and leaving the shadows?
That collaboration has not started.
Why?
I do not know. But I was speaking to the president just yesterday, and we agreed that, for example, as a start, we should take control of the law school, such that before a person comes out as a lawyer, he knows what he ought to do.
Okay.
Yes, we've all been trained, but there was a classic example of somebody who has had some infraction of the ethical rules. I called him yesterday because he walked to my car and I was with the current president. And when I told him that, do you know that this thing that you did infringes the ethical rules? Strangely, a lawyer of more than 15 years standing said, "Senior, I didn't know."
Wow.
So I was telling a friend of mine that this year, when every lawyer pays his solicitor's license fee, he ought to be given a set, the small booklet of the ethical rules, the new rules, LI 2423. Everyone should have one. Because it's not a defense that you didn't know, because you ought to know. But that effort must also be made by the General Legal Counsel, so that every person who pays his solicitor's license fee will know the ethical rules, because he will have been given a copy.
Let's go back to 1982, after the gruesome murder of these noble judges. How did that impact on the practice of the law from the perspective of the bar and as well as the bench?
Of course, at that time I wasn't a lawyer, but from what I hear, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of fear in dealing with especially certain cases because of the antecedents.
Right.
But I believe that even now, when cases which are politically charged, come before judges, some judges become squeamish because that cannot leave a person's mind. I remember one judge walked up to me when I think I was president then. I'd been given a case and she was scared. I said, you ought not to be scared. Do what your mind tells you. And that's it. But you could see that there was fear in her.
Right.
Because the case was politically charged. But
there's been a recent instance where a judge told a party in open court that you don't know the people you're dealing with. That was also, a politically connected case. Now, if what you're saying, the account I'm giving is anything to go by, it means that fear is still in the heart of people, and that could impact negatively on the delivery of justice.
Of course.
Or not.
Of course. Anything that does not allow a judge or a lawyer to operate freely, it's not welcome. Because you see, it's a fundamental right that you have as a lawyer, based on what the Constitution says, the right to think and believe in anything. And anything which is done to negative it, it's not welcome. So we can go on and on and on for the photographer, for whoever is working here. Anything that you do, I believe that this organization has rules and regulations which in the broader spectrum fits into the national constitution, because you cannot derogate. And I do not think that you would want to do that to this person or expect the person to do it unto you. So it's disheartening when you see some of the things which are going on. And sometimes you just feel like, hiding in your own corner, enjoying the little that you.
But that is not typical of the GBA.
No.
Because the GBA in the past, and some have said in the past, and looking at the conditions that may have necessitated 1981 and all of that, are playing back issues of corruption, issues of abuse of power, issues of misuse of taxes here and there.
Yeah.
The GBA was very vocal. Do you buy the idea that the GBA has lost its voice?
Definitely not.
Why not?
Because I've had opportunity to speak on this issue. The fundamental issue with the GBA was fighting was democracy and lack thereof. Now, it's different. Now, every person who is ruling us was elected by us.
Right.
So there's no fight in that direction. The fight is to see whether or not at the end of 4 years you would want to retain the person who is ruling you. So the fundamental issue with the GBA was always fighting, being the return to civilian rule. It does not exist.
Right.
Two, there are so many other voices. For example, then it was only GBC. Now we have TV3, we have social media, which is also a very strong force now. So I cannot say, I will never accept that the GBA has lost its voice. We are still a solid group of people which is recognized by the Constitution.
But the frequency with which the GBA in the past, even under a democracy, since 1992, if you will, would issue statements on critical national matters, seems to have dwindled. Do you agree?
I disagree.
Why?
No, because you see, the focus is a bit dispersed. So, for example, I'll give a classic example. When the NDC was going round in putting its manifesto for the 2020 elections, they met us. And this same issue came up. And we were accused by Asiedun Ketsia, my friend from the Consultative Assembly. And I said no. And I demonstrated to him that all the issues that he had mentioned, we had issue statements. And he was surprised. Well, smart as he was, he said, well, then the decibels are not high enough.
Okay.
But on all the issues he mentioned, Delta Force, we had issue statements.
And do you think that those statements had any impact at all?
That is a different matter. But with any critical issues which affect the rule of law, the freedom of the people, we do our best.
So for example, in recent time, a lawyer was murdered.
Yes.
Highway robbery,
yes,
so to speak. The matter is still before court, by the way. But the speed and the higher decibels, borrowing your expression as Idun Ketias as well, with which the GBA went about it, you know, measuring that with Ejura in Kranza South, 8 people who died in the elections, the missing Takrady girls now dead, and all those, the plethora of them, Nenachuri Benta in the Pram area, Josephine Asante of the Ghana ports, the guy in Ghana Water who died in the northern region. I could give you off the top of my head about 15, 16 of those cases.
Yes.
Now, the GBA was very loud when one of your own, unfortunately, died. But these are the ones. People were expecting a lot more louder, you know, calls from you.
Unfortunately, a lot of people don't listen. Because somehow, by divine or providence, I printed out my speech in 2019, 2020, and 2021.
Okay.
They are all here on the Martyrs Day, because every Martyrs Day, the president has an opportunity to speak to some current issues.
That's right.
2019, I spoke about the 3 Takrady girls and security. 2020, I spoke about the impending elections, the behavior of people in authority whose pay is from our taxes.
Right.
2021, I spoke about Ejura, which got me into a little bit of trouble. They're all here. So you see, every Martyrs Day, and I believe the current president will speak about some topical issue today.
Right.
So it is, we will never renege on our duty, because as I was speaking to Paco this morning, because of our nature, playing the middle role in society, it's actually easy for us to speak, because we don't do politics. And personally, I don't believe that any political party has the sole prerogative of knowledge.
Right.
Because together we build a country. So I believe that some from here, some from there, and collectively. But as I said on our Fanspin platform yesterday, we must have some degree of honesty in us to be able to accept when we are wrong and when we are right. And that is the first step that we should take. If we should move away from very divisive politics, it will help us a lot.
But can we?
That is another question.
Because it does appear, for example,
it's entering our DNA.
The institutions of state that must assist us in making very bold decisions, the NCC, SHRAJ, Information Services Department, all those ones, they are stifled when it comes to funding. The NCC is not a profit-making organization, so when they request for monies, they ought to be giving the monies to educate the people, to know that, well, if you have a problem in your community, the MP is not your first port of call. It is your MCE, because he takes your property rate, business operation permit, all those taxes. But they are stifled. And the electoral record will show since 1992 that all the parties, save NDC and NPP, have not even been able to get a 10% of the total valid votes cast. So can we change it? It means that we're moving towards a point where we have a duopoly, unfortunately.
Unfortunately,
but
yes.
how do we reverse the trend? What do you propose?
Well, it is Mr. Forson who does the crystal ball. I don't do crystal ball matters, but using data, it doesn't look like it will change from the duopoly. It doesn't look like that will change. But I believe that those in leadership, I think, have enough intellectual power to lead in a certain direction. As Professor Adai always says, leadership is cause and everything else is effect. And somehow, a lot of Ghanaians, especially in the private sector, are doing so well. How come it does not translate onto the national level? How come it doesn't translate into public services? There's something fundamentally wrong. And that is what we should all identify and try to eke out. How come you come to private stations like here and you feel like, yeah, in Sky TV or some other international station, you go to the state broadcaster and you feel that, no, there's something wrong. So that is what we have to identify and try to uproot. You see, for example, our sayings, Abenejuma Wanswa, Abenejuma, there's that thinking that if it belongs to government, it doesn't belong to anybody. And
let's get back into the GB and its issues.
Right.
There's a group yesterday called Linsod. Chris Akome had signed in something with demanding for justice for people who were arrested from the demonstration yesterday and the day before. It appears that you're getting some more lawyers coming together to form parallel groups aside the GBA. Is the GBA worried about it? That
absolutely not.
These are your members of
absolutely
the bar
not.
Moving away?
Absolutely not.
You are not worried?
No. It's their constitutional right. In fact, members even within the GBA come from, we have a group called Friends at the Bar. We believe that we should dress well, we should practice well, we should show ethical behavior. And it is not a threat to the GBA. So if a group of lawyers doing what the Constitution has guaranteed them to do, how can the GBA be worried?
But when they're saying almost the same things you're saying, or if you will, a matter comes up and they're the ones seen to be, the forward push rather than the GBA, you should be worried, shouldn't you?
No. The GBA has too much traction over the years, recognized by the Constitution. Mind you, that is a fundamental difference.
Right.
To be worried about, if you have done a little law, they say, de minimis non curat lex. The law does not take notice of little things. If you have children.
I've not done law, please.
Or do you have children?
I have one son.
How old is your child?
My son is almost 4.
Almost 4. When you are coming to work and your child is playing with feeding bottles, do you worry?
I don't worry at all.
You just go to work and come back.
See, legal education in this country,
right?
It's been a big issue
yes.
in terms of the numbers that we get in. And your association has always told us how we need more lawyers because the reach and spread is not equal to the ratio is inadequate in terms of our population.
Yes.
What are your own views now about legal education? Some believe that we should relax the rules, get more people in there, and show some more training and get them spread out so people can have access to lawyers.
Yes, there must be access to lawyers. Relaxing the rules, absolutely no.
Why?
In fact, the rules must be tightened because I always say that lawyers kill people every day. But because the causal connection is not so direct, people don't see it. Because if a doctor treats you and does not treat you well, you die straight away. But if a lawyer makes you lose your family heirloom, makes you lose your company, all you do is, But the causal connection cannot be seen by people. Therefore, I think that the training must be tough. Because lawyers, deal with people's lives, people's marriages, people's properties, people's companies, people's lives. So the training must not be tapered down. But I believe that somehow the law school must be innovative enough, open more campuses. In fact, if you look at my 2019 speech in Takoradi, whilst the president was sitting there, I said, if government, for example, should offer scholarships for people to do their masters and their PhDs, then the capacity to train would be spread out so that in the next about 5 years, we'll have so many people who are able to train. Because I said that we slept as a country from my father's days when they were 8 in the law school. And when we woke up, there was an explosion of numbers. But we were not prepared as a country for those who can train infrastructure-wise. And that's where we find ourselves. So now we are forced to fight backwards to do what we should have done years ago. So yes, I agree that the numbers must be increased somehow, but a lot of people don't look at the capacity to train. Because yes, we need more journalists, but we will need people to train proper journalists.
Are senior lawyers interested in teaching?
I believe so. Of course, if you give the person the capacity to train. As I was driving here, I was just thinking of retirement. But because I went to Cape Coast University, I have a diploma in education.
Right.
So I can teach.
Right.
You see, but if I don't have enough mental capacity to teach, I'll be leading people in the ditch. Therefore, one of the things that we should look at is the capacity. So if the state should pump into the lawyers who want, scholarships, it's always, as the fans people will say, dream can. It's always planning. Because there's no way you can increase capacity overnight. You'll have to train people.
But do you see that conscious effort towards
I think
planning?
The new director of the law school, the new Yao Pong, is a very forward-looking person and very receptive to ideas. And he has quite some time to go, and I believe that he will change things. I have 100% confidence in him. Of course, he's human. But I have 100% confidence.
We cut sword for a new law school building. I'm sure you've been following.
I was president then.
You were president then. Are you happy with the progress?
No.
Why not?
Because they were supposed to have moved in October last year. And I don't think that can even happen this year. I am told that the schools behind the law school, they've moved. Right. And they will be demolished, so the extensions will rather be there. So
Neil Antivanderpoel is not happy about that. He says that the basic school there should be maintained as a basic school. If the law school wants a bigger campus, you should go and look for land elsewhere.
I see. I'm not aware of that.
I'm informing you.
Well, I'm telling you what I knew.
Okay.
That I was told about a month ago before I traveled that that space was available, so there was going to be an extension there. Definitely the infrastructural extension is important. And it's the training.
Training. Let's look at judges.
Yes.
And the continuous alignment of judges to political colours. So these judges were appointed under this regime, and so it appears recently this 7-0 50, 60, all those, figures that are put out there and the ratio. Does the GBA get worried that people try to pick judges and put them in political clothing?
Yes, it is worrying.
Why?
It is very worrying because, you see, if an application is put before a panel of even 28 judges and the application is unmeritorious, it will be returned 28-0. So, unfortunately, it is perception that how come that a series of applications were returned with a similar margin. You'll have to look at the facts and the evidence put before the judges. I know the judges individually, and they have good quality. So it hurts me that they are put in that jacket. Indeed, the president himself, in one of the clips, when he was interviewed about judges, he said, look, when people go to the Supreme Court, they are going to discuss issues of constitutional propriety and legal propriety. That's so right. It is sad that people should think that a person trained in the laws who has risen to that level will abandon his law because somebody appointed him. It will be sad. Those were the president's words, which I agree with. So I find it difficult to understand why some people will come to that conclusion. In any case...
Would you say the judges put themselves in that position?
In any case, when a matter is put before a judge, he either rules this way, that way. There's no way that you will have a draw. Of course, the losing party will always say that, well, there's something untoward happening. The winning party will say that, look, I had the more persuasive arguments. So that's how it is.
From where you sit now, former president of the bar, if you look back and look at the crop of lawyers that are coming up, do you have the confidence that they can lift the flag higher than you, the forerunners, have done?
It will be difficult for me to answer that question because I don't know what happens in the courts, because for the last 3 years I was not in the courts.
Right.
But from my own law office, I would say yes, because I have a crop of lawyers who are, believe me, I believe they are punching above their weight because they work very hard.
Right.
Because of the internal arrangement. And a few lawyers who have filed processes which I have read, I think that the younger generation are showing promise. But you see, it all boils or fits into the general economic situation.
Right.
You see, a person may be good, but certain issues, let me use journalism. There could be a very good journalist,
right,
but financial issues could corrupt him.
That's right.
And he will lose focus. So that is it. So the basics is making sure that the economic situation is such that everybody can breathe a bit easy. And I believe the potential is there.
The concept of non-custodial sentences, because you talk about, for example, I listen to you very frequently as president of the bar, prisons are choked, police officers say same, officers of the court say same. And yet we have two options, either a fine or a jail term or both, 3, let's say. When are we getting non-custodial sentences really in our books, so that not everybody is packed in that small place at Nsom or Anchor 4?
Yeah, I think there's a bill which, when the president comes, I believe he was sent to
it's been there for a long time.
No, the plea bargain bill.
That's right.
Yeah, I believe that it has, they finished working on it. And I agree with you. As for that one, it's a no-go area. The whole concept, there have been so many workshops funded by the UN, etc., etc. And even judges have been guided as to even the sentencing policy. Johnny.
Yes, sir.
And some of those.
Oh, yeah. Let's wrap up this way. I come to the activities for
Yes.
this one. I know that the writ laying is at 8.
Yes, they
this
should
morning,
be
so
done
we're
by
heading
now. Oh, yes,
towards
they should be in
Christ,
church
Christ
by
the
now.
King
Yes.
now. But the frequency again of groups, Fix the Country here, Arise Ghana, the One Ghana movement, everybody backing at the government. The government says, look, it's Russia, Ukraine, COVID. That's why we are in these difficult times. Are people being unreasonable with their government? Or is the government not being reasonable with their people?
I do not think they are being unreasonable. As I was driving here, I live at McCarthy Hill, and just at the intersection which takes you to La Paz, etc., I started smiling.
Why?
And I remembered when there was a lockdown, there were no cars on the road. Then I remembered what the Bible says, that this too shall pass. There's nothing which is permanent. So I do not think that they are being unreasonable. Everywhere in the world, there are demonstrations. Even in the UK, they have a 30-year high of inflation. America doesn't have baby food. There's general hardship everywhere. So I think it is within their rights to shout and demand that government, helps them to breathe easy. I don't think there's anything wrong. That is why I believe the Constitution guaranteed that right. The police. I think that everybody should be level-headed. Both the demonstrator and the person who is supposed to guard him. And once the point is made, I believe the government cannot be insensitive to the fact that every person is saying it. Yesterday, I was with one of my former clerks, and he was complaining about things. And when he was mentioning prices, I saw that everything has been increased by about 70 to 85%. So the hardship is not, I don't believe that ministers of state don't feel the hardship. Because even if you have a lot of money, what happens is that you'll have to be looking after more people and at a higher rate.
Do you think that most of them have become comfortable, complacent because over the last 6 years there's not been a major reshuffle? So some believe that they are at a certain saturation stage, comfortable.
Because I'll be speculating to try to go into their heads.
I'm asking you as a former leader of the bar, you have led people, committees, you have groomed people. So I'm asking you this as one who has led a whole national association before.
I would think that staying in one place, yes, definitely can engender some level of complacency. But if you are removed, you can look at where you were with better lenses. Because looking into the Ghana Bar Association, I can see that maybe I could have done things better this way.
Right.
So, yes, it could be that staying in one place. That is why generally as a policy, even in the civil service, people are not made to stay at one station for more than 4 or 5 years.
Right.
So I think that as a policy, yes, moving people around, always, gives them more impetus. Because, for example, somebody could be moved to a place where he has better skills,
right,
but wouldn't have known until he was moved there. He faces a new challenge, and the adrenaline pushes. So it could be. And I believe that those who are in power will look at that.
As a tax-paying Ghanaian,
yes,
would you say the president leading his government are on the right track?
Well, there was a survey, and 56% of the people said yes. I was not surveyed. So once I'm surveyed, I'll give my answer.
Okay.
Yes.
Now I'm surveying you now. Random sampling. Random sampling.
Well, a lot of things have been done. A lot of things have been done, contrary to some of the things which I have heard. For example, infrastructure-wise, I was on the Akosombo Road, and I saw some huge infrastructure development on railways.
Right, in Pakadan.
I didn't know about that. I hadn't heard about it anywhere. You see, so probably the government communicators should do a bit more to let people see what has been done so that the assessment becomes better. Because if you don't let people know what you have done, then people will be staying in their small corners and say that, well, you've not done anything. But if you let people know what you've done, they measure what you maybe you have raked in by way of taxes, match it with what you have done, and come to a more informed conclusion. So probably the communicator should do a bit more work.
I hear you. Forson, thank you very much. That's your camera. 30 seconds for you. What do you say to the nation?
Well, as a country, first I will say that we have to learn to have fellow feeling. We have to learn to be honest. I always end every speech that I make with Philippians 4 verse 8, where Paul says that whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things that are just, whatever things that are of good report, if there be any virtue, think on these things.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Lawyer Anthony Forson, former president of the Ghana Association, here sharing with us his own thoughts. And you know, today is Martyrs Day, 40 years after that gruesome murder of 3 High Court judges and a retired military officer. But we're converging at the Christ the King Catholic Church, right, diagonally opposite the Jubilee House or the Flagstaff House, and that's where the memorial will be happening this morning. Earlier they had done a writ laying ceremony at the forecourt of the Supreme Court, and you could go there and see for yourself. But Engineer Kwabena Japan, whose father was also murdered 40 years ago, right? She says this day, 40 years ago, witnessed the abduction and brutal and wicked murder of Mr. Justice Fred Puku Sarkodie, Mrs. Justice Cecilia Kranting Ado, and Mr. Justice Kwejo Eje Japan, all judges of the High Court, and Major Sam Akwa, retired Army officer. The significance of this day will still inspires the Ghanaian to be bold in defense of unassailable principles of human rights, rule of law, and liberty. The 3 judges of our courts, rightly named martyrs, upheld these sacred principles despite the intense hostility from the totalitarian military regime of Jerry John Rawlings. May our families who suffered this traumatic experience continue to find solace and comfort in the Most High God, and may the Almighty God also bless the selfless efforts of many of the vulnerable members of the of the Ghana Bar Association, who in those heady days risked their lives and saw it to it that the infamous day was marked every year. To those who made tremendous efforts for a semblance of justice to be served on the bereaved families, particularly the courageous members of the SIB, chaired by the late former Chief Justice Azukrab, the 23rd Chief Justice George Kingsley Akwa, who ensured that the slain justices were immortalized as martyrs of the rule of law at the forecourt of the Supreme Court of Ghana. And President J. Kufuor initiated the healing process by instituting the NRC. The bereaved families are eternally grateful. And it says, finally, to the Judicial Service for eventually summoning the inner strength to join the GBA in the annual commemoration of their slain colleagues. To all peace-loving Ghanaians who express shock and horror and at the heinous crimes, we celebrate this 40th anniversary in the hope that never again shall this horrific event happen in our motherland. God bless our homeland, Ghana, and continue to make her great and strong. Engineer Kwabena Japan is a son of the late Justice J. Japan, who died 40 years ago. We'll see you after the break. There's more here on New Day.